Welcome to the Noble Wisdom Path, where we uncover the sacred truths of your journey through Buddhist wisdom. A sword is useless before the empty hand. This ancient Zen saying reveals a profound truth about power. What if your greatest strength lies not in what you do, but in what you choose not to do? Power does not always roar. Sometimes it sits in stillness, witnessing storms without trembling. Sometimes it observes darkness not with hatred, but with clarity. In the great dance between ego and emptiness, between illusion and awareness, one figure stands uniquely capable of transcending the most deceptive form of ego, a narcissist. That figure is the Super Empath. Recent psychological studies suggest that narcissistic personality traits have increased by 30% in the last 2 decades, making toxic relationships more common than ever. Yet within this challenging landscape, Super Empaths represent a remarkable counterforce, not through confrontation, but through transcendence. A narcissist seeks to consume. They mirror, manipulate, confuse, and conquer emotionally. Their entire existence depends on external validation and control. But what happens when they meet someone who sees through illusion, feels deeper than words, and remains rooted like the unshakable mountain? The narcissist wields masks. The Super Empath sees through them. The narcissist manipulates with charm. The Super Empath listens with silence. The narcissist needs control. The Super Empath needs nothing. Thus begins a journey not of war, but of awakening. The transcendence spoken of here is not revenge. It is the dissolving of illusion in the presence of pure awareness. It is not by force, but by spiritual depth that the Super Empath disarms the narcissist. In Buddhist philosophy, particularly in the concept of sunyata or emptiness, we find that all phenomena lack inherent existence. The narcissist's power exists only when we grant it reality. When we see through the illusion, the power dissolves naturally. The Buddha taught that all that we are arises with our thoughts. The narcissist's control depends entirely on your belief in it. When a Super Empath withdraws this belief, the entire structure collapses. Today, we'll explore this dynamic through 3 perspectives. First, through an ancient parable wrapped in Zen wisdom and flowing with Buddhist truth. Second, through the lens of modern neuroscience and psychology, revealing how meditation physically rewires the brain to resist emotional manipulation. And finally, through a real-life story of workplace transcendence, demonstrating how these principles apply in our everyday lives. Let us now walk this path together, discovering how the silent power of mindful awareness can transform even the most challenging relationships into opportunities for spiritual growth. The mirror with no reflection. In a quiet forest, among trees that did not speak yet taught volumes, lived a woman named Amara, which means eternal or immortal in Sanskrit. She was a Super Empath, though she never used such terms to describe herself. Each morning, Amara would sit beside the ancient stone Buddha at the edge of the forest clearing. In meditation, she learned to observe her thoughts like clouds passing through the vast sky of awareness. Through years of practice, she had transformed from a person easily wounded by others' emotions to one who could feel deeply without becoming entangled. Amara did not seek praise or pity, only presence. She felt the pain in the leaves when the wind blew too hard. She breathed with the birds, walked with the dew, and wept with the setting sun. Yet unlike many empaths, she did not absorb these experiences as her own. She witnessed them with compassion while maintaining her center. Nearby stood a mountain, unchanging through seasons, teaching the lesson of stability. A stream flowed through the forest, demonstrating how to move around obstacles without struggle. And in a small pond grew lotus flowers, revealing how beauty can emerge from the muddiest waters. These were Amara's teachers. One autumn day, as crimson leaves danced to the ground, a stranger arrived. This stranger, whom we'll call Deva, meaning divine, in Sanskrit, reflecting his self-perception, had a smile that glimmered like moonlight on broken glass. Sweet words dripped from his tongue like honey, but behind his eyes there was thirst, not for water, but for control, for validation, for admiration. Deva had wandered from village to village, leaving behind a trail of admirers who eventually became disillusioned. In his childhood, he had learned that his true self was unacceptable, so he crafted a perfect image to present to the world. This image required constant maintenance through others' approval. The stranger approached Amara as she sat beneath a maple tree. He studied her carefully before speaking, instinctively recognizing something valuable in her presence. "You have a remarkable energy," Deva said, his voice melodic and practiced. "You are perfect. You are unlike any I've met. You complete me." Amara smiled, not out of pleasure, but out of knowing. For such lines echoed not from love, but from strategy. She had heard similar words before and recognized them as the first notes in a familiar dance. "Thank you for your kind words," she replied simply, neither rejecting nor embracing the flattery. And so the dance began. In Zen, it is said, "The fool sees the finger pointing to the moon and worships the finger." The narcissist is this fool. They imitate light, not knowing they are merely reflecting it. But the super empath is the moon itself, distant, whole, untouchable. Over the following weeks, Deva began to play his music. Praise followed by withdrawal. Warmth followed by frost. This is how the narcissist binds the unsuspecting, through cycles of reward and punishment, creating addiction to their approval. To most, such behavior feels like confusion, like walking through fog. But to Amara, it revealed an ancient truth. Clarity comes not from seeking answers, but from observing the mind's tricks. When Deva praised her, Amara did not swell with joy. When he criticized her, she did not shrink in shame. When he spoke of their special connection one day and then ignored her the next, she noticed the pattern without becoming entangled in it. The narcissist grew agitated. His charm, like arrows, bounced off the still lake of Amara's heart. He escalated his tactics, gaslighting, "You misunderstood what I clearly said," blame shifting, "Your sensitivity is the problem," and silent treatments, disappearing for days, expecting her to chase him. But Amara met each tactic with equanimity. This calmness enraged Deva further. One day, as they sat by the stream, he finally confronted her directly. "Why don't you react?" he demanded, his mask slipping to reveal the frustration beneath. "Don't you care at all?" Amara looked at him with eyes that held neither judgment nor attachment. "Because your words are not mine to carry," she replied gently. "Your storms are not mine to calm." She continued, "I see your pain. I feel it as clearly as my own. But I do not accept your projection of it onto me." This response pierced deeper than any argument could have. For the first time, Deva felt truly seen. Not his carefully crafted image, but the wounded being beneath it. This terrified him. In the days that followed, he redoubled his efforts. He tried to make Amara jealous by speaking of others who appreciated him more. She responded, "Comparison is the suffering of the ego. I walk with peace." He told her she was too sensitive, that she imagined things, that she was crazy. She replied simply, "If I am all those things, why are you still here?" The question pierced deeper than any accusation. The narcissist had no answer. Deva began to disengage, not physically at first, but emotionally. A narcissist always runs when their reflection becomes unbearable. They can only live in places where people absorb blame, self-doubt, and fear. But the super empath reflects something rare: accountability. And accountability feels like death to the narcissist. Eventually, Amara recognized it was time to walk away, not in rage, not in sorrow, but in compassion. Not because she was weak, but because she was awake. As she prepared to leave their final meeting, she whispered, "You are not my enemy. You are my teacher. You showed me the illusion of ego, and I thank you for the lesson. But I will not carry your karma anymore." Zen masters often speak of the emptiness that liberates. Amara now lived in that emptiness, not as void, but as vastness. And Deva was left behind in a hall of mirrors with no reflection to steal. The teachings behind this parable reveal profound truths about human psychology and spiritual development. Let's explore them through both ancient wisdom and modern science. In Buddhist philosophy, two lesser-known concepts are particularly relevant to the super empath's journey: upaya and sunyata. Upaya, or skillful means, refers to the Buddha's ability to adapt his teachings to the needs and understanding of different individuals. For the super empath, this manifests as the wisdom to respond appropriately to manipulation without becoming reactive. Rather than meeting force with force, they apply the precise response needed for their own protection and potential awakening of the other. As the Lotus Sutra teaches, by innumerable means, the Buddha leads beings to the truth. Similarly, the super empath intuitively understands that confronting a narcissist directly often strengthens their defenses. Instead, they choose the skillful means of non-engagement. Sunyata, or emptiness, is perhaps Buddhism's most profound teaching. It reveals that all phenomena lack inherent, independent existence. The narcissist's power exists only in relationship, only when granted reality by others. The super empath's understanding of emptiness allows them to see that the narcissist's control is ultimately an illusion. As the Heart Sutra states, form is emptiness, emptiness is form. The super empath recognizes that the narcissist's threatening form is empty of inherent power. Modern neuroscience now confirms what Buddhist practitioners have known for centuries. Meditation physically changes the brain in ways that enhance emotional regulation and reduce reactivity. Recent studies using fMRI scans show that regular meditation practice actually shrinks the amygdala, the brain's fear and emotional reactivity center, while strengthening the prefrontal cortex, responsible for awareness and decision-making. This neurological shift creates what scientists call the witnessing state, allowing practitioners to observe emotional triggers without automatically reacting to them. Dr. Richard Davidson of the University of Wisconsin has demonstrated that as little as 8 weeks of mindfulness practice can significantly alter these brain structures. This explains why super empaths who engage in meditation develop an extraordinary capacity to remain centered during emotional manipulation. Furthermore, research on mirror neurons, brain cells that activate both when we perform an action and when we observe someone else performing it, helps explain the empath's heightened sensitivity. Super empaths likely have highly active mirror neuron systems, allowing them to literally feel others' emotions as their own. However, through mindfulness training, they develop what psychologists call differentiation, the ability to distinguish between their emotions and those they're absorbing from others. This is precisely what allows them to feel deeply without becoming overwhelmed. The intersection of these ancient practices and modern science creates what I call emotional sovereignty, the ability to feel fully while maintaining inner boundaries. This sovereignty is what makes the super empath impervious to narcissistic control. As the Roman Stoic philosopher Seneca observed, the greatest power is to be in control of yourself. This sentiment echoes the Buddha's teaching that though one may conquer 1,000 times 1,000 men in battle, yet he indeed is the noblest victor who conquers himself. This self-mastery is not about suppressing emotions, but about transforming our relationship with them. The super empath feels everything, perhaps more intensely than others, but doesn't identify with these feelings as self. This non-identification creates a space of freedom that the narcissist cannot penetrate. In this space, the super empath discovers what Zen master Thich Nhat Hanh calls the art of suffering well. They neither deny pain nor become consumed by it. Instead, they transform it into compassion, even for those who cause harm. This transformation represents the highest teaching of Buddhism, that our greatest challenges can become our greatest teachers on the path to awakening. Let me share the story of Eleanor, a 35-year-old marketing specialist whose journey illustrates these principles in a modern context. Eleanor had always been the person colleagues turned to for emotional support. Her natural empathy made her excellent at understanding client needs, but it also made her vulnerable to emotional manipulation. When Michael, a new creative director with narcissistic tendencies, joined her company, Eleanor found herself caught in a familiar cycle. Michael would praise her work effusively one day, then criticize it harshly the next. He took credit for her ideas in meetings while blaming her when projects faced challenges. Eleanor initially responded as many empaths do, working harder to earn approval, absorbing blame, and doubting her own perceptions when Michael denied saying things she clearly remembered. The turning point came when her colleague Sarah introduced her to meditation and Buddhist philosophy. Eleanor began a daily practice of mindfulness and studied the concept of non-attachment. Rather than confronting Michael directly, which would have likely escalated the situation, Eleanor practiced what Buddhists call the middle way. She documented her work carefully, maintained professional communication, and most importantly, stopped seeking Michael's approval. When he praised her, she acknowledged it calmly. When he criticized her unfairly, she responded with neutral statements like, "I understand that's your perspective," or "Let's look at the data together." Most significantly, Eleanor stopped absorbing Michael's emotional projections. When he became agitated, she recognized that his emotions belonged to him, not her. Within 3 months, something remarkable happened. Without the emotional fuel Eleanor had previously provided, Michael's behavior toward her began to change. He couldn't manipulate someone who no longer responded to his tactics. Eleanor had transcended the dynamic not by fighting, but by transforming her own relationship to it, embodying the Super Empath's path of silent power. From these stories and teachings emerge 7 core principles that explain why the Super Empath naturally transcends narcissistic control. Let's explore each one. 1. Transcendence without intention. The transcendence is not personal. It is a natural consequence of being spiritually awake in the face of deception. Just as darkness cannot exist in sunlight, manipulation cannot exist in the presence of clarity. The Super Empath doesn't set out to destroy the narcissist. Their very presence, centered, aware, and unattached, naturally dissolves the illusion upon which narcissistic control depends. As Marcus Aurelius wrote in his Meditations, "The best revenge is to be unlike him who performed the injury." This echoes the Buddhist teaching that hatred is never overcome by hatred, but only by love. When you embody awareness, you don't need to fight darkness. Your light naturally dispels it. 2. Why narcissists target empaths. Narcissists are instinctively drawn to empaths because they sense the energy, the light, the healing qualities they crave but cannot create within themselves. The empath initially becomes the perfect supply source, absorbing blame, providing admiration, and reflecting back the narcissist's idealized self-image. But this only continues until awareness awakens. In Buddhist terms, this represents the law of interdependence, pratityasamutpada. The narcissist and empath initially arise together in a codependent dance. But when the empath awakens to this pattern, they step out of the dance, and the relationship can no longer continue in its old form. 3. The real power of the Super Empath. The Super Empath's power lies not in reacting, but in remaining grounded. Not in seeking revenge, but in refusing to participate in drama. This absence, this withdrawal of energy, becomes the greatest catalyst for change. It creates what Zen practitioners call mu, or nothingness, a space where transformation becomes possible. As Lao Tzu observed, nothing in the world is as soft and yielding as water. Yet for dissolving the hard and inflexible, nothing can surpass it. The Super Empath embodies this water-like quality, not fighting force with force, but flowing around obstacles with gentle persistence. 4. Karma and the narcissist. Buddhist law teaches, you will not be punished for your anger. You will be punished by your anger. The narcissist suffers not because the empath fights back, but because their own actions reflect upon them endlessly once the empath leaves. This represents karma in its true meaning, not punishment, but the natural consequence of our actions. When the mirror of the empath is removed, the narcissist must face their own reflection, often for the first time. The 13th century Zen master Dogen wrote, "To study the Buddha way is to study the self. To study the self is to forget the self." The narcissist, unable to forget the self, remains trapped in suffering of their own creation. 5. Liberation, not revenge. The Super Empath walks away not to destroy, but to protect peace. Yet in doing so, the narcissist loses the one mirror that kept their illusion alive. This represents the Buddhist principle of ahimsa, or non-harm. The Super Empath's departure is not an act of aggression, but of compassion, for themselves and ultimately for the narcissist, who can only begin healing when their illusions no longer work. As the DhammaMirror teaches, hatred never ceases through hatred in this world. Through love alone it ceases. This is an eternal law. 6. The Super Empath archetype. The Super Empath is not born from trauma alone, but from transformation. Pain may open the doorway, but self-inquiry, meditation, and spiritual clarity strengthen the soul. They embody what psychologist Carl Jung called the wounded healer, someone whose own healing journey enables them to help others. Their wounds become wisdom. Their sensitivity becomes strength. In Buddhist tradition, this represents the Bodhisattva path, one who transforms suffering into compassion and returns to help others cross the river of delusion. The super empath knows when to speak and when to remain silent, when to hold space and when to close the door. They are not consumed by others because they have touched the truth within themselves. 7. The art of being untouchable. In the end, this is not about war, it is about awakening. The super empath transcends narcissistic control not by trying to, but by ceasing to play the game. This is the Zen way. You do not attack the waves, you become the ocean. You do not argue with illusions, you walk as truth. You do not beg to be understood, you become understanding itself. As you live quietly, lovingly, beyond the reach of manipulation, the narcissist's influence fades, not because you fought them, but because your light made their shadow irrelevant. A beautiful Zen proverb states, "When the flower blooms, the bees come uninvited." Let your blooming be your response. Let your presence be your protection. Let your silence be your revolution. The path of the super empath is not one of revenge, but of radiance. And this radiance, peaceful, powerful, and pure, is what truly transcends the darkness of narcissism. Now that we understand the principles, let's explore 3 practical techniques that can help you cultivate the super empath's silent power in your own life. First, the 5-second pause practice. When faced with emotional manipulation, implement the 5-second pause. Before responding to provocative statements or actions, breathe deeply and count to 5. This small space creates freedom from automatic reactions. Neuroscience confirms that this brief pause allows your prefrontal cortex to engage before your amygdala triggers a fight or flight response. With practice, this pause becomes natural, giving you the power to choose your response rather than being driven by conditioning. As you breathe during these 5 seconds, silently note, "This is not my emotion to carry." This simple recognition activates the witnessing consciousness that is central to both Buddhist practice and emotional sovereignty. Second, meditation for boundaries. This adapted loving-kindness practice strengthens both compassion and boundaries, the dual qualities of the super empath. Begin by sitting comfortably and bringing attention to your heart center. First, direct loving-kindness toward yourself. May I be peaceful. May I be free from inner and outer harm. May I be well. Then visualize a boundary of golden light surrounding you. As you maintain awareness of this boundary, extend loving kindness to the difficult person. May you find peace. May you be free from suffering. May you find your way. This practice cultivates compassion without absorption. You wish them well from a place of healthy separation. Third, the gratitude reflection. Each evening, write down 3 moments of emotional sovereignty from your day, times when you maintained your center despite external pressure. Express gratitude for these moments, however small. This practice rewires your brain to notice and strengthen your capacity for non-reactivity. As the Buddha taught, what you think, you become. By focusing on moments of sovereignty rather than moments of reactivity, you gradually transform your default response. The Dalai Lama reminds us that the enemy is the greatest teacher. Through these practices, you transform challenging relationships into opportunities for profound spiritual growth, embodying the super empath's path of transcendence through awareness. As we conclude our exploration of the silent power that allows super empaths to transcend narcissistic control, let us remember that this journey is ultimately about freedom, not from others, but from the patterns within ourselves that make us vulnerable to manipulation. The Buddha taught in the DhammaMirror, mind precedes all mental states. Mind is their chief, they are all mind-wrought. If with a pure mind a person speaks or acts, happiness follows like a never-departing shadow. This teaching reveals the true source of the super empath's power. It is not about changing the narcissist, it is about purifying our own minds through awareness. When we no longer respond from conditioning but from clarity, we naturally transcend any attempt to control us. The narcissist, like all of us, suffers from the fundamental delusion that the Buddha identified as the root of all suffering, the belief in a separate, permanent self that must be protected and enhanced at all costs. Their manipulative behavior is simply a more extreme manifestation of the same ego clinging that affects us all. Understanding this truth allows the super empath to respond with compassion rather than contempt. As Thich Nhat Hanh teaches, when another person makes you suffer, it is because he suffers deeply within himself, and his suffering is spilling over. He does not need punishment. He needs help. Yet compassion does not mean subjugation. The middle way of Buddhism teaches us to find balance, to offer understanding without sacrificing our well-being, to extend kindness without enabling harmful behavior. The Noble Wisdom Path invites you to discover this balance within yourself. Through mindful awareness, you can develop the emotional sovereignty that characterizes the super empath, feeling deeply while remaining unshakable, extending compassion while maintaining boundaries. Remember the words of the Buddha: "You yourself, as much as anybody in the entire universe, deserve your love and affection." This self-compassion is not selfishness. It is the foundation of true compassion for others and the source of the silent power that transcends all forms of control. Thank you for walking this path of wisdom with me today. If you found value in these teachings, I invite you to deepen your journey with the Noble Wisdom Path. Subscribe to our channel for weekly insights on applying Buddhist wisdom to modern challenges. Hit the notification bell so you never miss our new releases. Share your own experiences in the comments below. Your story may be exactly what another seeker needs to hear. Join the Noble Wisdom Path community. Subscribe, hit the bell, and share your reflections below. Until next time, may your awareness be your strength and your compassion be your guide.